Hi, I'm Diane Hullett, and welcome to the Best Life, Best Death podcast. Today, I'm revisiting an old friend, Hospice Nurse Julie. And Julie and I first recorded a session some time ago, and I'm so excited to have her back because a lot's happened in that time period. So Julie she started out as a TikTok star. She's got 1.1 million followers on TikTok. In fact, on Hospice Talk views, there are 600 million views, and many of them belong to real life nurse Julie McFadden. She's also on YouTube with 200,000 followers, 184,000 followers on Instagram, and 300,000 on Facebook. So you can see she's a real social media phenomenon and a genuine working hospice nurse in the Los Angeles area. So I'm excited to have Julie McFadden back. So, hi, Julie.
Hi, Diane. So nice to see you again. It's like full circle, I feel like.
So full circle. We first talked back in like November of, oh gosh, I'm going to forget the date. It's
2021, right? Or 20?
I think it was 2021. Yeah.
Yeah.
You were like one of the first sort of big name people I reached out to. I saw an article in like USA Today, and my husband's like, you should reach out to her. And in some ways, you were just really starting this journey. I mean, you've done so much in the 18 months since. It's really cool to see.
Oh my gosh, thank you.
For people who are listening and don't know who you are, tell us a little about Hospice Nurse Julie. How did you start doing this?
So I am a hospice nurse. I am an actual nurse, a hospice and palliative care nurse, and I still do that. And yeah, like you said, I think it's been like a year and a half or 18 months, whatever you said, where I started Hospice Nurse Julie on TikTok, where I was just sort of educating about death and dying and saying the 5 main things I wanted most people to know, not really knowing what was going to come of that. And it just turned into, it kind of got a mind of its own. And now I educate about death and dying on the internet, on all platforms. And it's been really cool. And I am still a nurse. So it's like, I still am nursing as a hospice and palliative care nurse and educating about death and dying on the internet.
So amazing.
It's been great.
So amazing. Like, yeah, YouTube, you've got, I think, really important videos on YouTube and TikTok. If someone's not familiar with TikTok, how long are those little snippets?
Yeah, TikToks are usually 1 minute to 3 minutes. 3 minutes is kind of the longest I usually do, but usually 1 minute to 3 minutes. And then I try to do longer ones on, I try to do longer ones on YouTube. And then I'm on Facebook, and, I just, Instagram to me is the most fun because you can do the stories where you kind of like talk into things and you get to know my personality a little more. So I find that the most fun, but all of the platforms have been really great. It's been really great to see people really wanting to learn about death and dying.
Yeah. Yeah. I think yours is one of the voices that has really made it just really normal. Like you're flipping through Instagram and there's something about death and dying right in there with cute animal videos and, whatever your friends did on the weekend. Like you just get this whole mix. And I can't help thinking that the social media platforms are bringing all this to younger people. Wouldn't you guess?
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I started out because I thought there were so many interesting facts about death and dying that most people didn't know. And one of the coolest things that I really wasn't expecting is young people telling me that the videos and the education are helping them fear death less. So there is a lot of death anxiety that I wasn't really even familiar with. I didn't realize that this was like a thing. And the education seems to help with that. So what you're doing, what I'm doing, what Hospice Nurse Penny is doing, what all these people on the internet are doing seem to be helping. I was trying to help people actually learn about death and dying, which is great, but I didn't realize like younger people who have a real death fear or death anxiety, it's been helping them too. So
yeah. I think that's so neat. So in your videos, you talk really directly and succinctly about just some of the things that happen at the end of life that you just feel like, wouldn't it be great if people just knew this and weren't so surprised by it or shocked by it? And of course, we can't generalize completely because every death is unique, whether it's from disease or accident or old age or frailty or whatever it happens to be from is going to impact it. But you say there are like 5 things you wanted to convey, or you talk about sometimes broad categories like changes in sleeping or changes in eating. Let's just share some of your knowledge about that.
Yeah. So the thing that most amazed me when I became a hospice nurse, like over the year of kind of the learning that you get when you change areas as a nurse, right? I was an ICU nurse where we were like constantly doing things to keep people alive. So then to move to hospice and to see how the body just naturally knows how to die, and we can help with symptoms of the disease that they're dying from, but like the dying process, the body's built to do it. Just like if a woman chooses to have a baby, right? For the most part, the body knows how to have the baby, and the baby knows how to be birthed for the most part, right? That is what I found death to be showing me. And it was like so fascinating to me that I had to tell people. So what did I see? I saw that the body makes you naturally more tired. So you are having this like slow, gradual sleepiness, which if you don't resist it, will help you, right? And you have the slow, gradual, less need for food, slow, gradual, less need for water, so for thirst. And when that stuff starts happening, like your calcium levels start going up, so you are easily more tired and you want to sleep more. When you truly are not eating and drinking anymore, like during the actively dying phase, which is a few hours to a few days before death, many family members think, oh my God, they're not eating and drinking, they're starving to death. That has to be so awful, you know? And that's not the case. So your body is built to do that, and it's making yourself do that because it knows it's dying. And it goes into, again, this is generally speaking, not everybody, but a lot of times the body can go into something we call ketosis, which is not like the diet. The diet, you're still eating and maintaining things, but you're in ketosis. This is because you truly are not eating and drinking. So you go into ketosis, and it decreases pain. It increases euphoria. It gives you an overall feeling of like goodness, right? You just feel like better. It's like a natural anesthetic. And I say these things because that's miraculous to me. I mean, yes, we're dying, but like the body is doing it to help and we feel okay about it. So that's why we want to have so that's another fact I always like talking about, is like a dry death, being dehydrated, because the more dehydrated you are, the more you have this ketosis thing happening. So you actually feel better. So one of my videos, I called it, your body releases death endorphins. And I got a lot of slack for that because everyone's like, death endorphins? Like, prove that. Where do you see it? And that's true. I was like, shit, I can't really prove it. That's what a hospice doctor used to say to me. Anyway, I did do some investigating, and that's where the whole ketosis thing comes in, where like it releases this like euphoria. It makes you feel euphoric. Anyway.
Right. So like our desire to be like, oh, here's a glass, here's a straw, drink.
Yes.
Or like that might have been fine 2 weeks ago, but in that actively dying phase, and maybe you can talk about what kind of signs you see that are the actively dying phase in a slower death, of course.
Yes. And just FYI, if someone's asking for food or asking for water, by all means, give them food and water. And a dry mouth is not comfortable, right? So like you can still do sponges and like make so their tongue's not dry, things like that. So like it's not like, don't give them water, you know, right. If they're asking, and keep their mouth moist and all the things, right? So
if they want it, they want it. But if they're right at the end, you're not pushing it.
Yes. And the original question, which I kind of went on a tangent about, was like the things that I want people to know. That's what the main thing is, that the body's built to die and it knows how to do it. So let's not get in the way of that. The less we get in the way of that, the better. As far as actively dying goes, that's what I love to show in my videos, because if you're not used to seeing someone actively dying, which means a few hours to a few days before death, it can look scary and it can look like they're not okay because you're not used to seeing them look like that. And we know, I know as a hospice nurse who's used to seeing a body dying, that this is very normal. So, their face is going to look different because their eyes are usually open. They're not blinking. They're not making eye contact with you. They're unconscious for the most part. They're not usually waking up and talking or saying, making eye contact. Their mouths are usually open because all of our muscles are relaxing. So it takes muscles to close your mouth. It takes muscles to blink, to hold your eyes shut. Those things are relaxing. So your eyes are a little open, your mouth's hanging open. Sometimes your tongue's doing weird things. Your breathing always changes, and that's like a metabolic thing. You know, your chemistry is changing, so it's changing the way you're breathing. You're usually unconscious. You're usually not eating and drinking, and there's usually like secretions, you know, just sounds, things that sound different, look different. You're breathing different. You feel different. So the people who are watching this think, "My loved one's being tortured. This is awful. I can't believe this." And really, it's like the most natural thing ever. And we just need to see it more so we know it's natural. And I think we show, you know, TV. I mean, everyone knows this, but like TV and movies, like someone's talking, saying some nice monologue, and then they close their eyes and they die. It's like, that's not how this goes.
Right.
I mean, so I guess every once in a while that can happen, but for the most part, that's not what's happening.
I think of the term labor, you know, I think of that when you
Yeah.
talked about the labor of birth, it's like the labor of death, like it is work to get out of the body.
Yeah. So I just like explaining what it looks like, right? And either explaining it or showing it in some videos where I show what it looks like to have the changes in breathing, or to hear the terminal secretions, which is also called the death rattle. Just to help people who choose to want to watch it, because some people don't, but people who choose to, I think it's good. I think knowing what to expect helps decrease fear.
I know one person I worked with, she said, well, this is so weird. You know, she said, like, when I had my son, that was the first birth I'd ever been a part of. And then when I attended my sister's birth, she was like, oh, you know, I learned so much through that attending. Why couldn't I have done that a few times before having a baby myself? And she said, I feel the same way about death. Like, I just kind of would like to get a little more familiar with this before a loved one is going through it. So we talked about sleeping and eating and drinking and breathing. What are the other big ones you like to cover?
Oh gosh, there's so many. I think talking about morphine, I'm talking about medications you can give to help with some symptoms, which usually are not, the symptoms are usually not coming from death. They're usually coming from diseases. And the fear of giving medication at the end of life. I always like to educate about morphine is okay, you know, and morphine can help with more than just pain. So it can help with pain, and it can help with shortness of breath. Like you usually see people having some sort of labored breathing or changes in breathing, which doesn't really need to be medicated, right? That's a natural thing, and the body is just doing it. It's like almost like a biological response. But if you think the person looks like they're uncomfortable, or they have like a grimacing, or they just don't look fully relaxed, a little bit of morphine is not going to kill your loved one or make things happen faster. It's just going to relax their diaphragm, relax their central nervous system, and kind of make them, you know, I think because opioids get a really bad rap in our world because they are being abused, and that's a whole nother podcast, right? And I feel for drug addicts, and so there's no shame there. It's just because of that, people are so afraid of them. And they automatically assume any kind of pain medicine is going to kill someone, or at least hasten their death. And that's just not true. It's actually pretty hard, because in order to die from that, you have to have a respiratory arrest, meaning you stop breathing, right? And it takes a lot of pain medicine to make you fully stop breathing. So that's not what we're doing at the end of life. We're not giving them enough to make them stop breathing. We're giving them enough so to feel relaxed. Right. And not everyone needs it, but I just like to educate about it so there's less fear around it.
I hear a lot about how, you know, the statistic on the amount of time people spend in hospice is really small, right? Like the average stay is just a few days, I think right now. I should have looked it up before we talked, but I remember it's less than a week. Why do you think people are so hesitant to get hospice involved?
I think because, you know, I think this starts long before any death. Like I was just on another podcast trying to explain this, because I think, yes, we need to educate about hospice more, but I also think we need to like change the way we look at death and dying as a society. So I think as a society in generally speaking, it's like death isn't happening. It's the worst possible thing. It's not going to happen. ever. And it's like
the outcome we don't want. Let's not even
yes.
discuss it as an option. Right.
Yes, yes, yes. We're going to do everything for it not to happen, when and the reality is death is inevitable and we're all going to die. So like, I think we need to change the way we are looking at death, which is a huge undertaking. It will probably take many decades, or I don't know, but like, it's that we need to start there. We need to start with this whole, like, we're not really dying type of thing. Because I think,
or that somehow that's a failure rather than
yes,
eventuality, and
yes,
could go simpler or could go more complicated.
yes, yes. And I think with changing that, it can also help changing this idea of hospice, because to me, and I always say, hospice is truly about living. And I feel like when I say that, people think it sounds so cheesy, and people think I'm saying that to make people feel better about hospice, right? Like that's what someone in hospice would say to make you feel better.
Let me whitewash that fence. And
Yeah.
you think it's one thing, but it's another. But
Yes, but really, I
you
mean
say
that.
that. Yeah.
I truly mean hospice is about living. Unfortunately, we live in a world where we're going to die. That's it. At least right now. That may change, but right now we are. And there are specific diseases that we kind of know you will die from if you get them. And I guess I say it so harshly, or I don't want to, but I say it so like straightforward because I think people need to hear that, so they can choose how that looks for them. And they might choose to the way I don't like. I obviously have an opinion about what you should do, which is like accept that that's what it is and kind of make your choices from there. Because I think if people know, hey, you likely have a year or two, maybe, because of this disease that you now have. How do you want that to look? Like, what do you want those last couple of years to look like? Do you want to be at home? Do you want to be doing some things, but not, some medical interventions, but not everything? Because you can choose, you can plan how your last couple of years look. And hospice can help you with that. So that's why I feel like it's a place to live, because we're helping manage symptoms. We're helping you go through this process of death and dying, which is hard. And we deal with it every single day. So we help you and your families kind of go through it all. So you have I think, a more fulfilling and more peaceful end of life journey versus one of like fighting and not being aware and symptoms. And it's not always like that too, right? I'm kind of painting this picture of like one's worse than the other, but I just think it's important to at least plan, like hope for the best, plan for the worst.
There's something too about it. It feels like when someone is direct themselves in looking at the truth of their diagnosis, if it's a diagnosis, then that helps the family be more like on the same page. Because I think so often either the dying person or a family member or people are out of sync, and so it can even be that the dying person has been with one of their children and maybe their spouse, but then the other child comes in from out of state. And it's almost like you have to start over, explaining the processes and bringing them up to speed, because you've traveled some tricky ground about what the diagnosis is and what the possibilities are. So I think about, I think the medical field, and I think about hospice, and I think about doulas as being, and social workers as being people who can help the family come together, hear the facts, and get on the same page, which if the person says, I don't want any more chemo, and the kids say, no, you've got to fight like crazy, that's a discrepancy, right? But how do you work through those discrepancies? And as far as I can tell, being silent about it and ignoring it and pretending it's not happening doesn't help anybody.
Right. And I think too, there's just a lack of, like I have seen what I think people just need to know more about healthcare and about specific diseases. If you're not in it all the time, you don't know. So you don't know how, like I can clearly see someone's diagnosed with, let's just say pancreatic cancer, right? And we know as healthcare workers, I say we, like, the oncology, all the people who deal with that stuff all the time, what it usually looks like, what the progression looks like, what the next steps are. Cause I'm not saying like everyone should just go into hospice right when I just mean, I think we even need to have knowledge around, if you don't want to go into hospice, what does that mean? What does that look like? What steps do you have to take? What chemos are you going to take? What surgeries do you have? Once the surgery is over, then what? Like, I think we also don't do a good job at kind of showing the people that are going through it the big picture, right? And
like, this
so
is the
they can,
trajectory of what we think
yes.
will happen.
So then
I
they
think
can
they
make
give us,
choices.
yeah, I think they sometimes we're given just like the next step. Like, this is what we
Yes.
recommend next.
Yes. Which I get, because it's overwhelming, and like there's nuance here, right? I'm kind of speaking, like, I'm speaking very generally when I know there's nuance and it's not black and white, and all. That's why this is difficult. But I think in general, because people don't understand the big picture of it all, they make choices they might not necessarily make. They wouldn't necessarily make if they knew the whole picture. Right. And I think we play a lot in our like, as humans, in this realm of like, well, we don't really know. We don't know for sure. And I think that's helpful and nice and beautiful, and, hope for the best, all the things, and a little misleading. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? Like, yeah. So I don't really know the answer. I don't want to be Miss Doom and Gloom and like give everyone bad news all the time. But also, I think it's a little unfair that we always try to live in this realm of like, well, we really don't know. I don't know. We don't, and
right. Or it's almost like, I think I've heard people call it like toxic positivity, right?
Yeah.
Like, it's all going to turn out. Well, maybe it is. And turning out may include dying from this.
Yes.
So if you knew that, or if you face that, even if you're not sure of the timeline, how would you live differently?
Yeah. 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 And I just think we need to have more conversations like that in general, everywhere.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I mean, I think that in some ways is probably your most important message, is that learn about this, and then you won't be so afraid as the caretaker, as the person who's going through this unfamiliar labor, as the adult children, or family and friends. How can you educate yourself in simple ways, like listening to this podcast, where you've just learned a few things that maybe you didn't know before, or maybe you're listening and nodding your head going, oh yeah, that's what happened when my grandmother died, or that's what I saw with my uncle.
Yeah.
So
can I give you a good example? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Can I give you a really good example though? When I do see things on TV or see it, like, I think like, oh my God, that's a great example. So there's a show, I think it's on Netflix, called From Scratch. Or it's not a show, but it's like a series, maybe. Episode 7. Like that, I don't think they do it perfectly right, but there's an episode where I think they do a great, they show a really great example of how healthcare can kind of really miss the boat, where someone is definitely terminally ill, right? But they're in the hospital, not for their terminal illness, but from a symptom of it. So like they got septic. So they got bacteria in their blood, and now they're sick because they're septic. And because of but they don't address the terminal illness in the hospital. They just address the being septic. And now because he's septic, his liver's failing, his kidneys are failing, all these things are failing. And different doctors are coming for each individual organ, versus talking about this person's dying. That's what's happening. This person has a very terminal illness, and things are happening because of that illness. And instead of addressing that, we're going to have the kidney doctor come in and say, maybe you should start dialysis. We'll have the liver doctor come in and say, maybe you should maybe you'll be on the transplant list. Like instead of seeing as a whole that this person is dying because of this terminal illness, let's talk about it. And they just do a really good job at, and that's what happens all the time. And if you don't know better as a family member, you're just listening to this doctor and that doctor, and no one's doing anything wrong. They're just not addressing this as a whole. And it's like, what? What's going on here?
That's a great example. And so as the caregiver or the advocate or the family member or the friend who's there, how do you kind of keep helping go up to that big picture and see what the choices are? And this is where, I really love this whole thing of like, how do you have these conversations earlier? How do you have them when you're not in the hospital? How do you have them when you're sitting around the dinner table, having a great meal, reflecting on your life or something? And so there's not this urgency to it and this fog of the chaos and fear. So you kind of
Yes.
want to think through your values about this and there's so many good ways to do that, right? There's the 5 wishes, there's the
Yes.
best 3 months that I teach, there's the conversation project. I mean, I think there's a lot of really interesting ways to educate yourself and kind of dive in. There's so many good books to read.
Yeah.
And if you like little clips of social media, there's Hospice Nurse Julie and
That's
Hospice
right.
Nurse Penny. Like, right? I love that.
Yes. Yes.
You're
Yeah.
very different and you're both so amazing with what you bring with your personality to these platforms. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
well, thank you so much, Julie. I mean, I just think continuing to bring this topic to the general public is just going to continue to pay off. And I do think the younger generation, say, I'm thinking sort of 40s and 30s at the moment, and 20s also, I do think they're going to have a different relationship
Yeah.
to this because of some of the education that's out there. And a lot depends on how their family members die and what they see and what can happen in those circumstances.
Yeah. Yeah. I hope so. I mean, it seems like people are interested, which is always really, it's just been a really amazing year and a half of seeing people being interested in learning about this and seeing how many other people are doing it too, like you and many others that I see on different podcasts and social media. Just it's really cool. It's really cool to see it.
It's pretty neat. It feels like an explosion of interest and energy and information. And then it also feels like a really small world to me. Like, I love how
Yeah.
people kind of come around. It's like, oh, wait, do you know so-and-so? Oh yeah. Do you follow so-and-so? And it feels like this network of people that's pretty neat. Well,
Yeah.
Julie, how can people find out you? How do they follow you?
Well, I am basically on all social media at Hospice Nurse Julie. So if you just put in Hospice Nurse Julie, not everyone's on TikTok. So TikTok, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, so Hospice Nurse Julie, you'll find my videos and stuff there.
You show up. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
You can find out more about the work I do at Best Life, Best Death. And you've been listening to the Best Life, Best Death podcast with Julie McFadden, Hospice Nurse Julie. Thanks so much.